When Marilyn Monroe and Joe Dimaggio got married, it seemed like a match made in heaven. After all, she was the golden goddess of Hollywood, and Joe was one of baseball's greatest superstars.
Now here's the hit that makes it 42 games in a row for Jolting Joe.
But their marriage was much more than just a publicist's dream come true. It was a union between two people who were deeply in love. But then, the world was stunned when Marilyn and Dimaggio filed for divorce only 274 days after their wedding. But the divorce didn't stop their loving each other. They always remained friends and lovers throughout the years. During those last hectic months of her life, they had finally decided to get married again. But their second marriage would never come to pass. Marilyn was found dead in her home. Dimaggio had lost the one great love of his life. Marilyn Monroe's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame tells us only that she was a movie star. But she was much more. She was the quintessential movie star, an extraordinary mixture of glamour, sex appeal, and innocence. From her obscurity in Hollywood, Marilyn's hometown, she rose to become the most recognizable woman in history. Born in 1926, the unmarried Gladys Baker gave birth to Marilyn in a hospital charity ward. Marilyn never met her father, Ed Mortensen, a traveling salesman. Shortly after her birth, Marilyn was placed with foster parents. At 10 months old, Marilyn's deranged grandmother broke into the house and tried to suffocate the infant. Meanwhile, Gladys resumed her job as a film cutter at RKO Studios, faithfully paying Marilyn's $25 foster parent fee. Gladys regularly took her daughter on weekend outings, mostly to nearby Santa Monica Beach. Then, when Marilyn was 9, Gladys somehow managed a down payment on a home right next to the famous Hollywood Bowl. But Marilyn's single, solitary moment of brightness was cut short. Gladys's fragile emotional state collapsed, and she was committed to an institution where she remained for the rest of her life. After her mother's breakdown, Marilyn was placed in an orphanage near RKO Studios where her mother once worked. But Marilyn endured, got good grades, and wound up finishing junior high in Brentwood, California, right next door to Beverly Hills. Her beauty was beginning to turn heads. But before her stardom back in 1942, the 16-year-old Marilyn married 21-year-old Jim Doherty. It was just as World War II was starting, and within a few months, Doherty joined the Merchant Marines. On that, Marilyn quit high school and got a job in a defense plant. At the defense plant, Marilyn's fresh beauty was noticed by an Army photographer who took her picture. Overnight, she became a wartime pinup girl. For Marilyn, that's all it took. She set out to become a model. She signed with her first agent, Evelyn Snively, of the Blue Book Modeling Agency in Hollywood. Her husband, now back from the war, disapproved, so the 20-year-old Marilyn divorced him and devoted all her energy to her new career.
You know, I never knew Marilyn Monroe. I knew Norma Jean Doherty, Norma Jean Baker. But Marilyn Monroe and Norma Jean were two different people. Norma Jean was my wife. Marilyn Monroe was a glamorous movie star. I don't know anything about her life. I never talked to her. I just didn't know her.
Tom Kelly, Marilyn's first photographer, was a key figure in her modeling career, putting her on over 100 magazine covers.
When I first asked her to do it, why, she turned me down. But after thinking it over for a few days, why, she came back and said, I would like to do it. I think it was partially a favor. I had done her a favor once before, and she really did need the money.
Kelly sold Golden Dreams for $500. Another shot, A New Wrinkle, sold for $250. Over the next 2 years, the publishing company sold over $750,000 worth of calendars at 25 cents apiece. Marilyn's job was over in 3 hours. She spent her $50 and forgot about it.
Publisher of Playboy magazine.
She was a very striking lady, and then I think I got lost along the way. I could not have rewritten history any better than to have the very first Playmate of the month, Marilyn Monroe, because she defines that innocence and sexuality.
Then she appeared in an exciting new medium called television.
This is the first car I ever owned. I call her Cynthia. She's going to have the best care a car ever had. Put Royal Triton in Cynthia's little tummy.
Right, lady.
Cynthia will just love that Royal Triton.
In the late 1800s, immigrants flooded the shores of U.S., searching for their share of the American dream. Joe Dimaggio's father, an Italian fisherman, was one of them. Settling near San Francisco, he began raising his sons to be fishermen. The young Joe Dimaggio expected to follow in his father's footsteps. For a while, Joe worked on his father's boat, like back in the old country. But things were different for kids here in America, especially when it came to baseball. Baseball was, after all, the national pastime. But Dimaggio made it into a national passion.
I think that you should tell some of these boys that may be listening what you had to do to reach the major league as a player.
Well, in answer to Mr. McCarthy's question, I would say for a young ball player to do is take quite a bit of advice from the older folks. And that way, I mean, try to learn the finer points of the game and to be a clean liver and to swing that bat hard when you see that ball on top.
Joe Dimaggio, in his way, was a model, a role model, that is, for every young baseball player in America. However, despite the adulation he inspired, he was always distant from the other players. In his childhood, Joe's family kept to themselves, never socializing with neighbors or with anyone really. Throughout his career, Joe was always quiet and withdrawn. But as Dimaggio often said, he preferred to let his bat and glove do his talking for him. The only time he seemed to be at peace with himself was when he was on the field playing ball.
I'm just taking my natural swing at the ball, but naturally I would like to break the Babe Ruth's record, 60 home runs.
Dimaggio's rookie year was amazing. He batted .323, hit 29 home runs, and scored 132 RBIs. He was so accomplished at this early stage in his career that he astounded his teammates, his managers, the fans, and the press. Over the years, there was only one ball player who ever broke through Dimaggio's private shell, and that was his teammate Lefty Gomez, a real goofball. When Dimaggio went out on the town, it was usually to Toots Shores, the hot New York nightclub. There he would tuck himself into a remote booth and talk to very few people. One night, Lefty Gomez introduced Joe to Dorothy Arnold, and the two fell in love.
Well, I've had many a thrill in my day as a ball player and everything else, but I want to say this is one of my happiest and best thrills I've ever had.
When Joltin' Joe and Dorothy held their wedding in his hometown of San Francisco, the whole city turned out to celebrate. After their marriage, the happy couple returned to New York to set up house. They did most of the things that newlyweds do, except that Dimaggio hit home runs for a living. Naturally, the new Mrs. Joe Dimaggio became bosom buddies with Mrs. Lefty Gomez, and they went to the ballpark every day to watch their husbands play. By year's end, the Dimaggios had a baby boy, Joe Jr. Through the camera, Marilyn herself was born. While at Fox, Marilyn appeared in only one film, Scudda-Hoo, Scudda-Hey.
What's the smallest part you ever had?
Scudda-hoo, Scudda-hey.
Was that all you had to say?
No, in a picture called Scudda-hoo, Scudda-hey, I had one word to say. I said, hello, but it went fast. In fact, they cut it out.
The studio felt she was unphotogenic, and they cut her small role out of the film. After getting dropped from Fox, Marilyn called on a Columbia Pictures executive who arranged a contract for her there. At Columbia, she got a nice singing role in a musical called Ladies of the Chorus.
Anyone can see I love you. Anyone can see I care. The way I hold your hand and smile in your direction tells the world my heart is filled with nothing but affection.
But once again, her contract was dropped. Marilyn diligently continued her nightlife with men, especially those who might be helpful to an ambitious starlet. Next, she got a small part with Groucho Marx, where she played a dumb blonde for the first time.
Is there anything I can do for you? What a ridiculous statement.
Mr. Grunion, I want you to help me.
I have a little sand left. What seems to be the trouble?
Some men are following me.
Really? I can't understand why.
When Marilyn was a nobody, there was only one man in Hollywood who supported her ambition, and that was Johnny Hyde. He got Marilyn a small role in the film All About Eve, which she used to prove she was more than just a pretty face.
Tell me this, do they have auditions for television?
That's all television is, my dear, nothing but audition.
Johnny not only became her agent, he fell in love with her. He divorced his wife and bought a house in Beverly Hills, where he and Marilyn lived together. He wanted her to marry him, but she told him she wasn't ready yet. Johnny nevertheless promoted her, used his influence, and finally got her a small but pivotal role in the John Huston film Asphalt Jungle.
A friend of mine who was an agent, his name was Johnny Hyde, asked me if he might bring her to the studio and read for me for this picture that was coming up, the Asphalt Jungle. She gave a reading that was extraordinarily good. She was ideal. She was the girl. However, I had no notion that she was going to go on and be the star that she became.
Now Marilyn Monroe as Angela, the easy-living, green-eyed blonde.
What's the big idea standing there staring at me, Uncle Lon?
Don't call me Uncle Lon.
I thought you liked it.
Maybe I did. I don't anymore.
I had the market send over some salt mackerel for you. I know how you love it for breakfast.
Some sweet kid.
Haven't you bothered me enough, you big banana head? Just try breaking my door, and Mr. Emmerich will throw you out of the house.
Thanks to Johnny, Marilyn's future looked bright and clear. But then, without any warning signs, Johnny had a massive heart attack and died. Once again, Marilyn was alone. But it was nothing new. Her childhood years had sadly accustomed her to it. On a different note, for Joe Dimaggio, 1941 was his year.
He's just a man and not a freak. Joltin' Joe Dimaggio. Joe Dimaggio, we want you and I.
Beginning on May 15th, he began getting base hits in every game.
The New York Yankees outfielder goes to bat against Washington with a consecutive hitting streak of 40 games. A safety will tie a 19-year-old modern record. And on his third try, Dimaggio comes through. A screaming two-bagger equals George Sisler's mark for hitting in 41 straight games.
The standing record was 44 consecutive base hits. And when he hit number 45 and broke the record, the nation went berserk. And when Dimaggio kept getting hits, 46, 47, 48, the nation was glued to their radio sets. 49, 50. Dimaggio seemed unstoppable. Then on July 16th, his streak ended when he failed to get a hit in his 57th game. His record of base hits in 56 straight games has never been broken. It's considered not only the most outstanding feat in baseball history, but one of the most incredible events in all of sports.
Named Joe Dimaggio, top-ranking American League baseball player, heads for Uncle Sam's Army. So the $50,000 a year Joe Dimaggio becomes a $50 a month guy named Joe. Dimaggio says, I just wanted to do my part.
Even before Joltin' Joe Dimaggio left to do his duty in World War II, there were rumors that his marriage to Dorothy was about to end. Sure enough, while he was in the Army, Dorothy filed for divorce. Back in the land of make-believe, Marilyn's year at Fox had taught her how the studio game is played. Over the years, that popularity continued to grow, eventually landing her in a variety of movie roles, as in this early dramatic film with Richard Widmark.
When I stepped into that room, I ran smack into an adventure you don't forget in a long time. Because the screen has never shown this kind of woman before. The kind that reaches out in the loneliness of the night to a stranger passing by. I should have seen the warning of danger in her eyes. But what happened in that suspense-filled night was about to change my entire life. You all right?
Yes.
Her next film, Monkey Business, starred Cary Grant and Ginger Rogers.
Well, all set.
Is your motor running?
Is yours? Takes a while to warm up.
Does me too.
Different story with Marilyn Monroe. She was being courted at the time by Joe Dimaggio, who was around, and when he wasn't there, Marilyn would get on the phone to him, and she would continue her conversations while the take was going on, and the assistant coming to her, honey, get off the phone, we're shooting. And she'd just look at the assistant with those big eyes and go right on talking.
Hi, Dr. Fulton.
Hi.
What'd you say to her? Mrs. Fulton, he said hi. I heard what he said, you peroxide kissing bug.
Edwina, she didn't do anything.
I'll pull that blonde hair out by its black roots.
Edwina, please. Edwina, stop it.
Come on.
By now, Marilyn's career was gaining momentum on its own merits. She got yet another small but important role in a film called We're Not Married, again starring Ginger Rogers.
The winner, Miss Mississippi.
You know her? Yes, my fiancée. There's your mommy. There's your mommy.
And while it was true that Marilyn as yet wasn't star material, the studios saw the handwriting on the wall.
We're just two little girls from Little Rock.
So they teamed her up with the magnificent Jane Russell and put them both in a major film called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Overnight, Marilyn became a superstar.
Yes, it was a great book. Greater as a Broadway stage hit, and even more gorgeous, glittering, and hilarious on the screen. With Marilyn Monroe as Lorelei Lee, the world's most fabulous gold-digging blonde.
I just love finding new places to wear diamonds.
Men grow cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. But square cut or pear shape, these rocks don't lose their shape. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Naturally, Marilyn and Jane were obliged to immortalize themselves in cement at Grauman's Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Soon after, 20th Century Fox put her in another glitzy piece titled How to Marry a Millionaire. Not surprisingly, it was another box office bonanza. The film also co-stars Betty Grable and Lauren Bacall. In the film, Marilyn is blind as a bat, unless she wears her glasses, which is seldom. She followed up with the darkly sensuous murder film titled Niagara, which also starred Joseph Cotton.
Take me in your arms.
She sang of love just as she lived for love, like a Lorelei, flaunting her charms as she lured men on and on to their eternal destruction.
Smell like a dime store. I know what that means.
Sure, I'm meeting somebody. Just anybody handy, as long as he's a man.
But she could never be his, nor any man's, completely. And that thought whipped him into a frenzy that makes the screen thunder with unparalleled suspense.
Hello, please?
With the end of World War II, Joe Dimaggio resumed his baseball career.
Pandemonium at New York's Yankee Stadium. The great Joe Dimaggio comes back to the Yankee lineup. Out of action with a nailing heel since the start of the season, Joe has been, up to now, the game's highest-paid non-playing ball player. And all the fans and his team ever glad to see him back.
One interesting side note about that second season, during Dimaggio's baseball career, he never, ever showed his emotions on or off the field. Except one time, and one time only. The Yankees were playing their arch rivals, the Brooklyn Dodgers, in the 1947 World Series.
So the Dodgers are ahead 8-5. Joe Dimaggio up, bowling at club down at the end. And the crowd well knows that one swing of this bat, this fellow's capable of making it a brand new game again. Joe leans
in. Here's the pitch. Swung on, belted. It's a long one. Deep in left center. Back for Jean Frito. Back. He makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen.
Joe hit a long drive that seemed like it would go to the moon. But a Dodger player made a spectacular bare-handed catch right at the fence and deprived Dimaggio of a home run. When Joe saw that the ball was caught, he kicked up the dirt in frustration. For most people, it would have meant nothing. But to see Dimaggio doing it was a very big deal.
You know, I've had injuries that have been too frequent, and they certainly have been no fun. And as long as the game is not fun any longer with me, I've played my last game of ball.
Dimaggio continued to play baseball for another 4 years until his retirement in 1951. Of course, the major event in Joe's life didn't happen until 2 years after he retired from baseball. A friend set him up with Marilyn on a blind date in New York. On that first date, Marilyn couldn't help but be impressed. But even more, she just plain liked the guy. When their romance began, no doubt he was confident he could endure the constant glare of her media spotlight. After all, Dimaggio had spent 13 years in the glare of baseball spotlights. After a brief courtship, Joe Dimaggio, the king of baseball, married Marilyn Monroe, the queen of Hollywood.
Couple arrives at Tokyo Airport, a throng of 4,000 baseball and movie fans surge out of control, break through police lines. Joe Dimaggio and his bride smile bravely at their greeters, but they don't dare move. So back into the plane they go, while police clear a path to the cargo hatch with Dimaggio's convertible. The stratagem works. The former Yankee slugger and his picture bride escape into the car and head for the safety of their hotel. But their troubles aren't over. Next day comes a press conference where the public was barred, but the photographers and reporters more than made up for that. Their questions were rough, ranging from the risque to the ridiculous. And Joe, he's the forgotten man, which is something in Japan where baseball is so popular. I mean, never underestimate the power of you-know-who. But enough's enough. His patience is exhausted, and Joe says, go.
The crowds followed her everywhere, and for the first time ever, she realized her fame was worldwide. She was a phenomenon beyond anything the entertainment industry had ever seen. But to Dimaggio's dismay, when the U.S. Army asked her to perform for 17,000 troops fighting in the nearby Korean War, she accepted.
How have you and Mrs. Dimaggio enjoyed your trip to Japan?
Well, everything has been fine. We've enjoyed our trip. The only thing that I have to complain about is I haven't seen very much of Marilyn. She is making a trip to Korea, touring through the camps, and so maybe after that way we'll be able to spend a little time together.
Joe stayed in Japan rather than watch thousands of soldiers feasting their eyes on his new bride.
I'd say the highlight of my life was singing for the soldiers there. I stood out on an open stage and it was cold and snowing, but I swear I didn't feel a thing except good.
After leaving Japan, Joe went on location with Marilyn to shoot River of No Return, which also starred her longtime friend Robert Mitchum. Returning to Hollywood, however, he soon learned that home life with Marilyn was not going to be as he expected. By now, her professional life was a whirlwind, while Dimaggio, for years in the public eye, now longed for a private life with his new bride. But Marilyn's film obligations, with millions of dollars at stake, could not be ignored.
Oh, I think it's terrific. Well, it's pretty vulgar, if you ask me.
How so?
I don't know. I don't think it's very nice.
Very nice. Some girl.
You like that, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's very nice, but I'd rather it were me.
I said, what has Marilyn Monroe got that a million other women have and prefer not to show?
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Well, we're here to make the 7-year itch.
Location shots on the 7-year itch?
Uh-huh.
That's your latest picture, right?
Yes. Yes, I'm looking forward to it very much.
Joe didn't come along with you, huh?
No.
Did he see you off in Hollywood last night?
Oh, yes.
Well, you brought your hairdresser and your drama coach and 4 men from 20th Century Fox. All this and no Joe, huh?
Isn't that a shame?
I understand there's some fabulous location shots going to be made next Saturday night on Lexington Avenue when you do the Coney Island treatment, you know, walking over the subway grating and a gust of wind catches you and so forth. I imagine you'll stop traffic again on Saturday night.
Well, I'm looking forward to working in it very much.
In New York, Joe watched as Marilyn stood over a subway ventilator where her skirt was repeatedly blown upward, baring her legs and underpants.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
Sort of cools the ankles, doesn't it?
That scene was the centerpiece for Marilyn's new film, The 7-Year Itch, which of course broke all kinds of box office records.
Careful, I had my appendix out last year.
It's the funniest comedy since laughter began. Of a wife who spent the summer away, and a husband who stayed home to play and play and play.
Because now I'm going to take you in my arms and kiss you. Very quickly and very hard.
Hey, wait a minute!
With Marilyn Monroe, soaring to new heights as the screen's most lovable laugh-getter.
Everything's fine. A married man, air conditioning, champagne and potato chips. It's just a wonderful party.
Marilyn's provocative display was the final blow to their marriage. Dimaggio moved out of their house and left the legal formalities to Marilyn and her attorneys.
Miss Marilyn Monroe and Joe Dimaggio are presently having differences which they have brought about a separation. Miss Monroe has decided to file an action for divorce in Southern California, and it will be on the usual and ordinary grounds of mental cruelty. There will be no property or financial disputes between these parties. Both of them regret the necessity of the action, but they feel that it is inevitable at this time.
After only 9 months of marriage, with critically opposing needs, they separated and filed for divorce.
Right here, fella. Watch it, Sidney. All I can say as our attorney is that this is what we would say with the conflict of careers. Can we ask her about her health? We're going to do your work this morning, Marilyn.
She was devastated by the experience. In late October of 1954, the initial divorce decree was handed down, but Joe remained obsessed with Marilyn. He hired a private detective to trail Monroe to what he thought was her lover's apartment in West Hollywood. Friend Frank Sinatra accompanied Joe on his attempt to catch Marilyn in the act, but the plans went awry.
Well, I drove Mr. Dimaggio to the general area, and he got out of the car, and about 10 minutes later he came back and joined me, and we went back to the restaurant where we had been dining.
Apparently, the two burst into the wrong apartment and frightened an innocent woman who started screaming for the police. Marilyn was actually next door visiting a female friend.
Then you were not present with Mr. Dimaggio when an alleged entry was made in through a door.
I was not.
The event was later dubbed the Wrong Door Raid and became a great embarrassment for Joe, Frank, and everyone involved. On that, she went to New York to stay with some old friends. But all along, Marilyn had come to New York to study acting with Lee Strasberg at his famous actor's studio.
She was very important to him, and I think that the tragedy with her was
that she could do the things she dreamt about and never had the chance. Because I saw her do some of the scenes in the actor's studio. She was luminous.
One day I went in, I had a scene to do, and I was very nervous because Lee Strasberg could be a monster if you didn't, you know your lines and do your thing. So I thought, I'm going to stop off at this little bar. It was right there by the studio, and I'm going to have a drink and finish off my lines. Here's a girl sitting here. She had black hair, horn-rimmed glasses, looked, naive. I'll sit next to her. So I did, and she said, are you an actress? And I said, yes. She said, are you doing your scene today? Are you at the studio? And I said, yes. She said, would you like me to help you with your lines? And I said, why not? So we had a drink. We had a couple of wines. She helped me with my lines. And I said, I got to go. It's time. And I go out the door, and she said, Jeannie. And I look back, and she did it in the Marilyn Monroe voice. And I go, no, I don't believe this.
Inside Strasberg's classroom, Marilyn absorbed. Outside the classroom, she blossomed. The movie star, Marilyn Monroe, had been left in Hollywood. In New York, she was simply the real Marilyn. Her next film was a charming cowboy love story titled Bus Stop, which co-starred Don Murray.
No one but Marilyn could do justice to Bus Stop, the smash hit that had Broadway howling for more and more. And just look at the guy who ropes Marilyn. Introducing Hollywood's newest hunk of man, Don Murray.
The first time I saw her, actually, it was for some publicity shots. And she came onto the outdoors in this 20th Century Fox outdoor set. And they introduced us. Don, this is Marilyn. Hello, hello. Now pick her up and put her on your shoulder. Okay, and, it was that kind of introduction. I had no chance hardly to say hello, And she was in makeup for the film, which was a very white, pasty, clown-like makeup. The second time I saw her was at a rehearsal at her place, and she had no makeup on at all. She had just come out of the bath, and she just had a little baby oil on her face without a bit of makeup. And she was absolutely gorgeous. She had skin like a baby's. I mean, she didn't have a line on her face. And she was more than 30 at the time, and she just looked like a child.
Of course, there's only what you might call a physical attraction.
Physical?
I mean, you're so big and strong and, well, so darn healthy looking.
Guess I am in pretty good shape for the rodeo. Because you gotta be when you're competing in all 5 Class A events.
We did a love scene there, and she was lying under the sheets, and in order to get the feeling of the scene, she was naked. And as a matter of fact, it was very funny because when she acted, she had this perfect skin, as I said, but when she acted, she got very nervous, and she tended to break out in a rash. And my line in the scene was, she said, what time is it? I said, 9. She says, 9? I didn't get to bed until 5. And my line is, 5? No wonder you're so white and pale. But on the take, instead of saying white and pale, I said, 5? No wonder you're so white and scaly.
She met noted playwright Arthur Miller, and a love affair developed that would later lead to marriage.
When are you getting married, Miss Monroe?
It'll be sometime between now and the 13th of July.
Where, do you know?
No, I'm not sure where.
I think it's time enough for everybody to know when it happens and leave us with a little bit of peace until it happens.
But finally the time came for Marilyn's return to Hollywood.
Marilyn, how do you feel about coming back to Hollywood? Is this a happy time for you?
Yes, it is. It's a very happy time. I'm happy to be back. As I said, it's my hometown.
Yes.
You're wearing a high-hat dress now. The last time I saw you wear it. Is this a new Marilyn, a new style? No, I'm the same person, but it's a different suit.
In the meantime, Marilyn and Arthur Miller were married at his parents' house on the East Coast. Next up for Marilyn was what she considered the peak of her career. She went to London to star in a film called The Prince and the Showgirl. Her co-star was Sir Laurence Olivier, regarded by many as the world's preeminent actor. This was Marilyn's declaration to Hollywood that from now on, she intended to do only quality films.
You know what's going to happen? I'm going to fall in love with you.
'Cause I always do.
Always?
Both times. So, you better watch out. You better watch out.
While in England, it was only proper for Marilyn to meet the Queen of England. Unfortunately, when Marilyn returned to New York, disappointment waited. In Europe, she had gotten pregnant, and by the time she returned to New York, internal complications led to a miscarriage. The event, caused by her habitual use of barbiturates, shook her self-esteem. But her depression didn't last long, for she began receiving praise from all over the world as a superb comedian. Soon afterward, Arthur Miller's politics irritated some congressmen. Here, Marilyn meets the press.
How long have you been here, Miss Monroe?
Since the beginning of the trial.
Just staying in the house here?
That's right.
Has the trial upset your personal life to any degree, Miss Monroe?
I would like to say that I'm fully confident that in the end my husband will win this case.
After the government's sober deliberations, Marilyn's next film, Some Like It Hot, was a welcome diversion. Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis co-starred in this delightful romp.
Not since Scarface, so much action. Not since the Marx Brothers, so much comedy. Not since the 7-Year Itch, so much Marilyn.
You're not giving yourself a chance. Don't fight it. Relax.
Running wild, lost control. Running wild, mighty bold. Feeling gay, reckless too. Carefree mind all the time, never blue.
Now back in Hollywood, Marilyn began what was to become her last complete film. Titled The Misfits, some of the best talent in the film industry had been assembled. Her co-star, Clark Gable, was a living legend. The great director, John Huston, was a Hollywood monument. Marilyn's husband, acclaimed playwright Arthur Miller, wrote the script. However, once production started in the merciless Nevada desert, Marilyn began creating problems. Regularly late and/or absent, life was becoming an ordeal for her. The inevitable had to happen. Filming stopped altogether when Marilyn had a breakdown and entered a clinic for rehab. Her problems were not only emotional, Marilyn's narcotics were physically ravaging her body. There were doubts that the film would be finished. When Marilyn emerged from the clinic to resume work on The Misfits, it was like a whole new Marilyn. In this clip from The Misfits, there's an eerie feeling that Marilyn's screams of anguish are her own screams, long suppressed. Sadly, only days after the film was completed, Clark Gable died of coronary arrest. In the meanwhile, Marilyn and Arthur Miller had filed for divorce. On that, Joe Dimaggio re-entered her life, and they took a quiet vacation together in Florida. During those last hectic months of her life, they had finally decided to get married again. However, a few months later, Marilyn was drawn into a brief affair with John F. Kennedy. After John, Bobby audaciously had a fling with her. Then he too sent her on her way.
I saw that bad side of Bobby one time, and that's when he picked up the red diary. He picked it up, he thumbed through it, and he got really angry. He got red-faced, and he was swelling. His face was swelling. And when she came out, he threw the diary on the table, and he says, "Get rid of this. What is this? What are you doing this for?" And it was right after that he disconnected his telephone.
Returning to Hollywood, Marilyn began working on her next film. Titled Something's Gotta Give, it was destined never to be finished. All that remain are a few random outtakes.
Timmy, you know, far away in the South Sea Islands, when a man hurts himself and he doesn't want people to see, you know what he does? What? He has somebody else cry for him. How does that help? You'd be surprised. Can I cry for you? That's silly. I'm glad.
Meanwhile, despite her musical chairs with the Kennedys, Marilyn appeared at his gala birthday party at Madison Square Gardens.
Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
Because the Kennedy brothers had earlier used her with such callous abandon, Dimaggio harbored a deep resentment of them. Once during Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium, Robert Kennedy attended and posed for photographs with the famed player. When Joe Dimaggio came out on the field, he avoided shaking hands with the young politician. Rumors of Marilyn Monroe's affairs with both Robert and John Kennedy had become public knowledge. And Joe's noticeable hostility toward Bobby proved he was aware of the stories. Marilyn, returning home from the Madison Square Garden event, withdrew into her house. And always the barbiturates were near, her night table packed with bottles of them. If nothing else, then at least the pill dulled her senses into a hazy fog of existence. Then came that fateful day in the headlines. Marilyn Monroe dead.
One of the most famous stars in Hollywood history is dead at 36. Marilyn Monroe was found dead in bed under circumstances that were in tragic contrast to her glamorous career as a comic talent.
Marilyn Monroe was drinking very heavily, vodka and champagne, and she's also taken barbiturates.
Right.
And the combination of the two are very lethal.
Right.
And I'm 100% convinced an apparent suicide.
Right.
But it was an accidental suicide.
Right.
She just lost track of the barbiturates.
There was a flurry of confusion. Autopsy papers vanished. Was her death accidental, or intentional, or forced?
I believe everything was just coming to a crashing halt, and I would not like to say that that it was out-and-out murder, but I do believe the forces were leading towards an end. And someone I know came out from one of the studios not too long ago, and they said Marilyn was doomed. She was a skyrocket, and she was running out of control, and there were a lot of people around this enormous shooting star.
Tragically, the Hollywood firmament had lost its brightest star. Joe Dimaggio took control of her final journey. He barred the public, the press, and especially the Hollywood establishment from her funeral. What or who pushed her over the brink? No one will ever know. The memory of Joe Dimaggio is also now a part of history. Never remarrying, he passed away in 1999, 37 years after Marilyn died. The great sadness is that they couldn't live out their final years together as one of Hollywood's greatest couples.
It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around, finally found somebody who could make me be true, could make me be blue, and even be glad just to be sad thinking of you. Some others I've seen might never be mean, might never be cross or try to be boss, but they wouldn't do. For nobody else gave me a thrill. With all your faults, I love you still. It had to be you, wonderful you, it had to be you.